Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Black Doctoral Network weekly web series entitled Conversation Starters. I am your moderator, Fesse Longe. It's wonderful to be back. I am thrilled that we will be talking about another wonderful topic entitled Addressing the Gender Inequalities in the Workforce. And to facilitate this wonderful conversation, I have some wonderful expert scholars that will be joining us this evening to really dive into this current issue. The first panelist joining us this evening is Ms. Leslie Ekpe, who is a second year PhD student at Texas Christian University in higher educational leadership. She has her research focus to promote access for marginalized students in education, with a specific focus on college access policies and racial politics in education. I welcome you, Ms. Ekpe.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and have this much needed conversation.
Wonderful. The second panelist joining us is Dr. Pamela Ray, who is currently the Director of Child Development Center at the University of Texas in San Antonio. She also is co-authoring a book entitled Confessions of a PhD, Tales of Academic Success and the Struggle in the Ivy Tower. So I welcome you, Dr. Ray, for joining us this evening.
Good evening. I'm excited to be here and look forward to a very great conversation.
Wonderful. The next panelist that is joining us this evening is Dr. Judy Scherer, who currently is a freelance business consultant and project manager. She's currently obtaining her certification in diversity, equity, and inclusion at the University of South Florida. She's also has a plethora of experience in leading, managing, training, small business operation, mentorship, expertise in planning, monitoring, marketing, and reporting, also developing and implementing business plans. I welcome you, Dr. Scherer.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. The next panelist joining us this evening is Tiffany Dangleben, who currently is a doctoral student in school psychology at North Carolina State University, whom she's pursuing a plethora of interests at this university. So I welcome you, Ms. Dangleben.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to the dialogue.
Wonderful. So I want to go ahead and jump right into the content because we have a lot to cover. This is a very important topic, and I'm happy that you all could join me this evening as we dive into it. So the first question that I have is, what are some causes of gender inequality in the workforce? I'll go ahead and start with Ms. Dangleben.
Thank you. So some of the causes, there are many causes, but the underlying factor here is implicit bias. And so in relating to implicit bias, we carry unconsciously or consciously stereotypes about genders, what they are supposed to look like, how are they supposed to perform and dress. And from there, we act in discriminatory behavior. So if a person is not conforming to the social norm, what is expected of their perceived gender, then people may treat them differently. So for example, if a woman or a person who is perceived to be as a woman is supposed to fulfill that stereotype, they are supposed to be nurturing and kind. But we see that many women in advanced STEM fields, which are more male-dominated fields, are in order to get through the day and achieve in that setting, they're supposed to be more assertive, right? And to reach their goals. But at the same time, that assertiveness makes them not likable by their male peers, right? So the underlying issue here is implicit bias and how we perceive our peers and what hidden expectations we have from them.
Thank you. Wonderful answer. Dr. Scherer, what are your thoughts?
Yes, my thoughts on gender inequality in the workforce, workplace. One is a societal mindset, which the overall mindset of society has a significant impact on gender inequality and how society determines the difference in values in men versus women playing in starring roles in the arena. You find that most of the high paying jobs are given to the male counterparts, even if the women are more qualified or just as qualified as the males. But it's just a social, societal mindset that the man could do the job better than the woman. So the woman gets the second lead, the male always seems to dominate. The position, the female always comes in second place, even though they're equally qualified or the female is more qualified in the workplace to do the job. And typically in situations like that, the female wind up getting the job done, while the male is on the counterparts, getting the praise for what the female has actually done. So the societal mindset plays a great impact in that.
Thank you for that response. Ms. Ekpe.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting, the question in itself, because as Black women, we're at this intersection of racism and sexism, and that bias plays a critical role in the work that we do. Historically, we've been looked at as the Jezebel or the Manny, or always this nurturing type of individual. And so when we're put into, I speak from the academic or academia standpoint, when we're put in positions or we earn positions such as directors or high paying positions, we're still at a deficit because of the way institutions run, how things are politicized, how things are institutionalized. We're never this glass ceiling that we talk about so much. I would even argue that it's even more strenuous for Black women. So we're at that pivotal stage where we're trying to create change, but we're only allowed to do so much. And so I would argue that racism and sexism, especially for the Black woman, plays a role in the inherent bias, especially in the pay gap.
Oh, thank you for that. Dr. Ray, what are your thoughts?
I'm going to give it to you from my field. I see it very young. I see it early on, as young as early childhood. Um, I see where boys are expected to be a certain way and girls are expected to be a certain way. And, I even hear now, girls are emotional and whiny, and things like that. Very stereotypical, very young age. Um, just putting together a program for young children when you're buying materials and stuff is very stereotypical. When we're looking for dolls of community leaders, we're looking for female police officers and female firemen, but at an early age, it is already started, and that has already been spoken to, being that it's society. We start very early. There's the double whammy effect. There's research out there talking about the double whammy, and that's the double whammy of being a female, let alone being a minority female. So those are some of the things that contribute to what we're discussing.
Thank you all for those wonderful responses. I love how everyone was able to provide their own perspectives on that. So that's very important. So we've talked about the causes. Now I want to move more so into what are some examples of gender inequality that are currently in the workforce? Dr. Shearer.
Some of the gender inequalities in the workplace, especially coming from like the military background, is lack of body autonomy. Most women around the world, uh, even in the military, they don't have really control over their body, so they can't determine, when they become parents, which creates lack of options and limited access to cultural and due to cultural and religious oppositions, you find that a lot of times that the male in the workplace or inequalities always see the woman or the female as the one that, oh, well, she has to stay home and take care of the kids, so she's going to be absent from work, she can't do the job. Because even now in today's pandemic, the parent is at home uh, teaching the kid at school and still trying to do her work as well. So I think women are still underrepresented in the as an inequality in the workplace, because one, we are parents and we multitask everything, but we still get the job done.
Yes, definitely. You always get the job done. So thank you for that. Ms. Dangleman, what are your thoughts?
Yes. So I can talk from my career field. And so this might just be a little bit different from what we were talking about earlier. Um, but my field is predominantly of white women. And so thinking about recruitment, advertisement, and retention of minoritized individuals and men in this field to diversify help, right? So my field is school psychology. We work with young children and we help them with educational needs, behavioral needs, social emotional needs. And so when we interact with these children, what we do to help them shapes the rest of their lives, right? It shapes their educational experience, it shapes the way they succeed academically, social emotionally. And so for minoritized children, if all they're seeing is white women helping them or with good intention most of the time and falling flat, that's an issue. So within my field specifically, it will be low recruitment and low retention of other women, minority individuals, males. So that's a gender inequality within my area.
No, thank you for that. Dr. Ray, what are your thoughts?
One of the things that I've experienced being a part of higher ed is that, in the hiring process, look at the makeup of the committee. Is there a balance of men, women? Is there a balance of minority women, men on the committee? And what I've seen is that inequality, where you'll have a hiring committee and it's made up of a majority of males, or the chair of the committee is a male. And then you have candidates and you have policies and procedures that saying things like, well, you have to ensure that there's a balance of underrepresented cultures or ethnicities, and then hire at least put one female in the pool. So, when you have policies like that, that kinds of already sets up the group for some bias and some, discrimination. So again, when you look at it overall, you're looking at the policies. Who are the ones behind making the policies that says, well, at least have a minimum of one female in a pool? What kind of policy is that? So just sending that kind of message at the policy level. Those are some examples that I've seen in the workforce.
No, thank you, Dr. Ray, for that response. Ms. Ekpe, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we've all touched on quite a bit. And it's almost sad. Like, what has changed is what I was thinking about the whole time, right? These are the same arguments that were being had from our predecessors. And so one that came to mind for me is women are promoted less often than men. However, what we saw this past year, especially with the racial injustices that occurred in 2020 and then with COVID-19, women are tasked more with initiatives, right? So what we saw was, women, Black women in particular, being tasked with having to teach their colleagues about race and racism, or having to be the mentor to other students that look like them, all while trying to succeed at the job they do to get paid as a constituent of the university or whatever entity that they serve. That is taxing. That's traumatizing, right? Because we're human as well. And it's being put on this pedestal of, oh, we would love for you to do all this, take care of all this, nurture all this. I know we talked about caring before, care for all of these people. However, we don't want to give you the title of fill in the blank. So it's almost going back to that political stance of, we see you as doing enough for this role, but moving into that role where you have more leeway to make change or institute real change, that's too much. That's too much power for you, and we're not ready to give that to you. But we are ready to allow you to mentor some students across campus. That can be very taxing, and it can almost be, dehumanizing. And well, then what purpose am I serving here at the institution?
No, thank you all. I mean, these are wonderful responses. And just reaching out to the audience members who are currently watching this, we are engaged in a wonderful conversation regarding gender inequalities in the workforce. If you find this interesting, please share, like, and comment. Feel free to ask any questions. These expert panelists are here to answer them. So I want to just continue moving along in this discussion with our next question. How does organizational culture impact the presence of gender inequalities in the workplace? Ms. Nathan.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So this is a huge issue that I can see from the university perspective, because I also work with my university to address this issue. And so thinking about huge buzzword, right? Diversity and inclusion. What does that actually mean? So are you hiring one female, one person of color, and putting them into an environment where they're not thriving, right? Because there are microaggressions that aren't being discussed. And if it's brought up, it's brushed off, or it's taken care of in private without making it something known to others, so everyone can know that this is something that's not tolerated. So what kind of culture is being fostered at universities that allows everyone to know this is what we will and will not tolerate. This is what X, Y, and Z means, and how it affects other folks that you work with, and really, who are you hiring in the first place, and what kind of questions are being asked in interviews to really understand who that person is, outside of what their research interests are and how much money they can contribute to the university.
Thank you for that, Dr. Ray.
One of the things that I again find interesting, in my dissertation research, I did research looking at African American female college presidents, and one of the things I found in my research, the questions that they were being asked. There was even an incident some years back with a female candidate at Alabama State University, but thank goodness they worked it all out. But in her contract, it indicated that she shall not advocate in the president's court, that she was free. So even something like that, being a single female candidate for a position as high as CEO of an institution of higher education, things like that in their contract. Some of the questions that are asked, do you think you could do this job while raising young children? You're not married. Could you be able to do this job and decide if you want to date? Like some of the questions that my participants told me that they have been asked during their interviews and their aspirations and seeking office of being a college president as a female, I just thought it was real interesting. Um, and I'm thinking, well, if somebody stops the question and say it's not appropriate, but those are the type things that sometimes go on that lead to those inequalities in the workplace. Another thing I found out real quick about the culture um, in doing my research with African American female college presidents. For instance, um, if they had to go to a fundraising dinner that night. Now, this is the culture of the presidency at the college level because their job is fundraising. So if they had to go to a fundraising event that night, so say they may leave their office a little early, may go to the hair salon, touch up their hair, or do some things that women do. Well, if they walked into the salon and a bunch of women see them, it's like, what is she doing here? Is she supposed to be running the campus? But yet the male president can leave his campus, go get a haircut, then go off to the, fundraising dinner. So those type of organizational cultural things that we have to deal with. And if you notice, I indicated she went to the salon and there were other women. So sometimes we um, are not so kind to each other as women. That's another type of cultural thing that I see. If I saw my president, if it was a female, she walking into the salon and I knew she to see her there, that tells me she's a human just like me. She wants her hair to look nice. She wants to look nice. So why would we question why is she at the hair salon? She needs to be running the campus and things like that. The participants from my research told me those are type of organizational yet cultural things, and yet their Caucasian counterparts not treated like that. They could take a day off, go to the spa if they're having a mental health day if they want to. And if they ran into another Caucasian female, they wouldn't be whispering like, "Ooh, why is she in the spa? Don't she need to go run the college?" So those type of things, I think, in all, I would address organizational cultures with women, how we treat each other.
No, thank you for sharing that and your research findings. And this is why we have these conversations because you're
Yeah,
actively doing the work and getting the data and the results to share with our audience this evening. So thank you for that. Dr. Shearer, what are your thoughts?
Yes, the cultural impact that I see in gender inequalities coming from, and I would just continue to say, coming from a military standpoint, because right now I mentor junior ROTC cadets at the university, and what I see in them is inequalities and cultural. It has a big racial dynamics that links to their mental health, occupational satisfaction, and organizational change. These female cadets are under more stress because they're trying to work twice as hard to compete with their male counterparts in the ROTC. They also, have issues, female issues that are, concerning, and gender inequalities, mental health is a big issue. So those are some of the items that I see that we discuss, and we talk about mental health. We talk about occupational satisfaction. Being satisfied in what you're doing because it will lead to a rewarding career in the military, as well as organizational change. These young ladies are not, they're not only African American, but they're Caucasian as well. But I want them to know and have an impact that they can make a change. They can be the trendsetters for tomorrow's future in the military. And sometimes that's all they need to hear, and to give them an opportunity to be focused on what their goals are, because at the level of organizational change, you see the trend of more women taking lead and taking command, but they have to work twice as hard. And one of the ladies had mentioned something about the glass ceiling, where for the African American female, it's about the concrete ceiling. They have to hit the concrete first to rise
hmm
above the ground in order to get to the glass ceiling. So those are just some of the inequalities, even with the females African American as well as Caucasians, they have still are in second place because they have to work
Mhm.
twice as hard to compete and still, get the job done.
No, thank you for that, Dr. Shearer, and providing the insight from the military perspective. So we appreciate that. Ms. Dickman.
Yeah, when I think about even organizational cultures and what's been embedded for years before people of color and women entered the field, um, I think about the foundation that was set and how so many people are comfortable with what's been practiced. So when we talk about inclusiveness or we talk about diversity, as we mentioned before, those things seem so negative because it's opposing what's been practiced. And so when we're comfortable in what we've been doing because we think that it works, when in actuality it only works for you, of course you're opposed to change up the system because you're not understanding why everyone's talking about we need more women, we need more people of color, we need more people that are indigenous. Everyone's like, why? And then because you're benefiting from the system. And that's the culture that's been embedded. And when you're benefiting from something, sometimes it's hard to wipe your glasses and see, oh, why this needs to change. Right. And so I think about organizational structures within the institutional level. And even sometimes in the room when I walk in and I'm the only person that's a woman, and then the only person that's a woman of color. I mean, those two intersections already, I'm surrounded by white men making decisions for people that look like me. We already have a problem. Like let's start right there, right? There's no one in this room that could defend themselves, and you're about to impose a policy or a transaction that's inevitably going to affect who's ever on the outside of this meeting. We have a problem. Right. And so when I think about organizational culture, I think that people that are in power have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable and realize that inevitably to create this change, they're going to have to take some self-observance and see what's going on here. Like, why is it that you're so comfortable not changing up policies or not changing up actions or whatever it might be? And when you get down to the bottom line, it's usually because those administrators or those people aren't benefiting from it. And so I think we have a lot of work to do. And I mean, even when I think about it, when I'm in those rooms, I'm like, how can I get more people that look like me to be in this room? How can I use my power, right? Because I'm in the room as well. How can I use my power to bring others up into this room so that we can actually not just talk the talk, but actually walk the walk as well?
Thank you. And that goes, like you're stating the importance of representation of people that look like us. So, no, thank you for definitely highlighting that point. So, the next question that I have for you all is, what influence does race have on gender inequality? Dr. Shearer.
Race and gender inequalities, the influences it has as African American workers, the perception of racial discrimination has always derived from being in the minority, but also from their position as an organizational structure, we will always be a minority. And which in turns create disparities or racial discrimination in the workplace. It's included, but it's not limited to exclusion from critical social networks, wage disparities, and hiring disadvantages. Most African Americans do believe in race, workers believe racial discrimination is a silent factor in their occupational mobility in order to increase or to advance in their fields, which explains why there's, the perception of racial discrimination is such a high issue in today's workforce.
No, thank you for that, Dr. Shearer. Ms. Danglebent.
Yes. So I want to answer this in a twofold response that kind of captures I want to say. So race and gender, as we talked about, are intersectional, especially for Black women. And as I mentioned earlier about implicit bias, there are strong stereotypes that go along with gender assumptions and racial ideations, right? So, what is a Black woman supposed to do in a space where she's very much underrepresented and in a room where there are a bunch of white people, right, who cannot really relate to her story, really understand what she's going through. So there's that part, and so there's the mistreatment or maltreatment, very much unconscious to give people the benefit of the doubt, unconscious treatment against that individual. And then the other side to that is conformity. And so the minoritized individual feeling like they have to conform to the white culture, speak in a way that is more acceptable to that group, and talk about things that they wouldn't necessarily talk about with their family and friends who look like them, right? So kind of trying to relate to their music choices or things that they do on weekends outside of work. And so not really being able to be their complete self in a place that they spend 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. It's exhausting. So I just want to kind of capture those two perspectives.
No, thank you. I like how you conceptualized that and broke it into those two perspectives. So I appreciate that. Miss Eka, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, I think you touched on it beautifully, and I even think about how traditionally, um, in a world that oppresses us, we're always looked at as second class people, and so even I think we see the disparity when we have whether that be women or people of color in a higher position, and we're still questioned. Like, oh, okay, who gave you this job? Who gave you? I earned this job. Matter of fact, most of the times I have more education and experience than the person that's asking that question. So it's this weird concept of I must have been handed something to get where I'm at. Or even, I mean, we talk about affirmative action and how that's been, turned on us, right? Turned on BIPOC people. So now we're saying, well, we don't want to accept too many persons of color because then it'll have an effect on our academics. What are we doing here, right? Like, what can we can't win for losing. Like, it's, and so it takes me back to policy because the policies that are implemented often infiltrate racism, discrimination. So if we don't go back to the drawing board and rearrange what's already in play and rearrange what's been practiced for years, you can talk about diversity, but you can't be about it because the practices don't match what you're talking about. And so when I think about the role that race has to play, it's going to take more than training. It's going to take more than conversation to change up what's happening right now. It's going to take policy change and new policy implementation.
No, thank you for highlighting the importance of policy and its influence, definitely. Dr. Ray, what are your thoughts?
I want to take it to a historical point. Segregation. We are still segregated. We're still looking at the fact that we have women in certain positions or men in certain positions. And it seems like segregation worsens the disparity. And it increases, and then it puts us in social classes. So I want us to think about segregation. Let's even think about it from a historical standpoint where it was written by Willie Lynch. That's where we get the term lynching from. He said in his letters, I got a sure enough way to keep the young against the old, the light skin against the dark skin. So that whole historical concept of segregation, which keeps us separated, which keeps the disparities going, which keeps those disparities increasing, especially amongst African American compared to Caucasian females and so forth. So when I look at that, what influences race and gender, right there, historically segregation. Look at what's happening in society and just certain things with politics or whatever you're dealing with in your organization. It's still that segregation. We're still segregating, which impacts race as well as gender.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ray, for providing us with the historical perspective, which, as you can see, is still occurring currently. So thank you for that. So, going into the concept of race a little bit more, the next question that I have is, what challenges do African American women experience in the workforce? Ms. Dankman.
I think one of the biggest challenges that we experience is sort of being misunderstood. And I want to talk about some things that were just mentioned. So kind of having policies where you have a quota, so we should at least have like one Black person, right? And so when they get into that space and the intention is for that Black person to be representative of all Black people and be that voice for all Black people in the room, when we actually do talk about disparities in the Black community, and we're the only ones talking about these issues and bringing light to these issues within a predominantly white room, please don't be mad, right? Don't get annoyed that I'm doing the job that you intended for me to do, right? So I feel like that is a challenge and a just being misunderstood about like, okay, we want you here to do this and you're doing it. Don't do it too much, or like there's a disconnect. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges.
Oh, thank you for that response. Ms. Ekman, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I have to piggyback again because as I was thinking about how one day we're too assertive, and then one day we have to be the strong Black woman, and then the next day we have to mentor, and then it's always something, and then some way somehow it's always required of us to fulfill our job duties. So it's like, okay, we wear 20 different hats, we're spread thin, we're everywhere, and we're doing it well, may I add, right? However, we're not afforded rest. We're not afforded rest. I don't know about you all, but at the beginning of COVID last year, I was like, okay, we're going to get some time to rest. Actually, for me, I overworked. I was like, okay, now we're not in the office. That means I can have some time, I can clean, I just did more work. I felt like I had more time to do more work because if I don't, what are they going to think about me? What happens? Because I don't believe that I'm afforded rest. Now, thankfully, where I work in my office, I'm afforded rest all the time. It's actually embedded into our policy. Like, we will make sure that we have those mental health days. And because what I found is, as much as we're spread thin, if you are not fully 100% when it comes to your mental well-being, you won't even be able to operate the best way that you need to in order for you to be successful in your position. And so what I found was not only the challenges, we're hopping around from what people expect of us, and then we forget our own expectations for ourselves. And so what I challenged myself to do this past year was, if I'm tired, if I'm fatigued, um, this past year was traumatizing, I'm going to rest. And I'm not going to feel bad about it. I'm not going to make myself do something. I'm going to give myself time to just be. So that way, when it is time to contribute to my job or to whatever position I'm serving in, I can do it to the best of my ability.
No, thank you for that. And you just mentioned when COVID hit, working from home, transitioning to the remote lifestyle, it's almost as if you want to overcompensate. So, and thank you for definitely highlighting. Dr. Shearer.
I think exactly overcompensating is one of the key factors, and just the experiences that we face. It's still job segregation and lack of employment equality, because we're still forced, just a caveat on what one of the ladies said, we're still forced to do more, even though we're at home. And like you said, sometimes we feel like, we can't get rest. At the job, we can actually get up and move around, maybe go to another department, talk about
Mhm.
business or something related. But at home, you're constantly in front of the screen, Zoom after Zoom after Zoom after Zoom. And then, with job segregation, a lot of organizations, they still feel, because of, you being a minority, being a woman, that, oh, this is a male dominant uh, job, or this is a male dominant, a good old boy network. So they always give the better jobs, or the more jobs that will be more qualified, to their counterparts. And a lot of time it's who you know. And even though when we try to crack into that same arena with the group or the clique, for terms of saying, it's like you can't fit in, because uh, after work we meet at the golf course, after work we go for to the bar, we go to have drinks. Well, as a female, we have other obligations. We have to pick up our children from childcare, we have to be at home, we have to make dinner, we have to make sure homework is done. So we don't, quote, fit into that category. So therefore, we're not a part of the clique. So they talk about promotions and job opportunities over golf, over drinks, where we're
Mhm.
excluded from that arena because we have other things to do after 5 o'clock.
No, thank you, Dr. Shearer. Dr. Ray.
Uh, to piggyback off of Dr. Shearer, if I can add one thing to what you just highlighted, we're now caregivers to our parents who are
Yeah,
elderly. So after five, you know, um, going out for happy hour on Fridays is not me. I have to rest, be up Saturday morning to get ready to help my mom.
exactly.
And that's another, addition to that. One of the other challenges African American women face is, just this whole issue of us being radical. Again, I'm pointing back to my research because these were African American, CEOs of campuses I spoke with. And one of the things my research shows that it's okay to be radically passionate about what you do, but not radically passionate enough that you don't get rest, that you can get back up. And being radical does not mean in a negative sense. What I found in my research, it means that you are uncompromisingly compassionate and passionate about what you do. We're nurturers by nature, that whole nature nurture, theory. And sometimes the nurture part of the nature and nurture theory becomes a challenge for us. Oh, when we're being soft, oh, she's so emotional, she's being soft, if we shed a tear, you know, or if we're trying to enforce a policy or procedure that the organization has put in place. And I found that with my Caucasian counterparts, if they enforce something, it's like, okay, but if I enforce something, it's the mean old black woman. You know, but some people have that issue with women bosses. And again, it goes back to the research that talks about the double whammy. An African American woman boss is dealing with being African American as well as being a woman, and now she's a boss. So it's a triple threat. I would also add here another challenge that I just walked into after being blessed with earning a terminal degree. You know, when you get that PhD, they start looking at you a little differently. And that's another challenge we deal with. As my grandmother used to say, sometimes everything is not air conditioned. Some things we have to sweat for. So you have to respect that. But it should not be thrown at us like, oh, she thinks she's all of that because she's Dr. Ray or she got all them degrees on the wall. Well, you know, I don't look like what I look like now when I was earning all those degrees. So just if my counterpart that's Caucasian earn those same degrees, you treat me with the same respect that she gets. But it shouldn't be thrown in my face like, oh, you think you although you think you better because you got all those degrees. No, guess what? If you're another woman, I'm gonna help you get those same degrees on my wall. I'll be more than happy to help you because it was another woman that helped me. So I think it's another challenge we face when we are a little bit more educated than some. Not that we are inferior or trying to place anyone superior to us, but I've found now since I've, you know, graduated, especially in the academy, you know, an African American female, very educated, can also be threatening to some in the workplace.
No, thank you, Dr. Ray, for providing a very realistic um, perspective on how the challenges that African American women face. So thank you for that. So the next question, I know we've talked about the causes, a little bit of the historical pieces, policy, and some of the challenges. I want to move into looking at what recommendations would you propose to promote gender equality in the workforce? Ms. Ekbe.
Yeah, so recommendations we would probably go into tomorrow if we could all just list out the recommendations that we need. I'm sure that the panelists agree. However, I think the first recommendation that I would recommend is recognizing that there's a problem. Because I think that for a long time, history has shown that, especially institutions, they've operated in this norm. So to them, there is nothing wrong with how the system is playing out. So if you don't even believe that something's wrong, you don't believe there's anything to fix, right? So I would even argue just going back to the drawing board, are your practices inclusive? Look around in the room. Who is this affecting? Who is benefiting from this? Whether that's curriculum, whether that's pedagogy, whether that's like from sports to band. Who and what is benefiting from what your institution's mission, vision, and goals sit on? And then from there, we can kind of look and dissect. Okay, so we see a gap. There's something that's not working here. There's something that's not, appealing to women's staff at this institution. There's a drawback for Black women graduate students, right? So you can go to the drawing board and say, okay, there's a gap here, there's a gap here. How do we mitigate this? What do we need to change? What do we need to implement? And then collectively stand in solidarity in knowing that this is a problem that affects every constituent of the organization.
No, thank you, Ms. Ekbe. Ms. Engelman, what are your thoughts?
Yes. So I teach my students about the steps in bystandership. And so, as Ms. Ekpe was saying, the first step is recognizing that there's an issue, right? And then the second step is claiming responsibility. How can I help this person? And so I think it goes beyond leadership in them recognizing that there's an issue, but also having it be horizontal, right? So my male peer seeing that, it was unfair that I was passed up on this promotion because, not to say that I'm the best, but like I'm the most qualified, right, for that position. And using his power, being a white male, being a male, and bringing this up to someone, a manager or supervisor, and expressing that, right, and saying, hey, what were the conditions surrounding this? What happened? Expressing that, expressing discontent about the results and the decision being made, and really focusing on how to be an effective ally and to your other colleagues, right? In order to be an effective ally, you have to be aware of what is wrong, right? So going back to step one, having not just leadership, but like everyone being aware or having at least some foundational knowledge about inequality and what equity would look like. So the aspects of that.
No, thank you for breaking it down like that, Ms. Dangleton. I appreciate that. Dr. Ray.
I would say recommendation is pay, and demand the same, salary. Uh, Second, I would say, reject any attitudes of discrimination, being it's, chauvinist, racist, sexism, just, reject it, cut it off, at the knees, stop it immediately. Um, I would say help women gain power. And with that, I would say start in my profession, it's early childhood, start as young as we can. When the children are in the classroom, I deal with infants on up to 5 years old, but when they're in that room, they should see the diversity at its best. I even brought a prop, here's Black construction worker. It's a female. So these are the things they should see in the classroom, things like that. So I would say start there and let's just promote it as early on. Let's support our mothers and parents and just watch again for any signs of discrimination. Let's be reflective listeners. Sometimes we have to have those crucial conversations, but those are some ways I would promote it.
Thank you, Dr. Ray. And Dr. Shearer.
Yes, diversity, absolutely. As she had just said, we need to see more women of color sitting on the boards that are actually the boards that are making decisions, not only for the companies, but for the human resources that are making the policies and decisions. There need to be more representation of people of color, not only male, but females also, because when you're sitting on the board, you have a voice. We do not need someone of male white counterparts, good old boys, making decisions for something that they can't even relate to or that they can't perceive uh, what the African American body needs. With that, women empowerment, with more women empowerment and women sitting on boards that are making the decisions, it shows as a mentor to those that are in lower positions to look up and see and reach out and give a
Mm-hmm.
hand and say, when people
Mm-hmm.
see people of color on the board that are making a difference and offering their hand out to help up, they will achieve, and we will see more people of color on the boards that are making decisions.
No, thank you, Dr. Shearer. No, thank you all. Those recommendations, I'm definitely sure the audience members agree. Those recommendations are very critical and vital, and we can sit here and go through a plethora of them, but I appreciate all your responses. So that concludes all the questions that I have, but I have one special question that I would like to ask you all. How has your affiliation with the Black Doctoral Network help to enhance you personally and professionally? Miss Dangleton.
This is my second encounter with the network. So the first encounter that I had, I submitted an abstract to present at a conference on the experiences of Black women in mentorship which is very much not spoken about. And now this is my second encounter with you all. And personally, I feel seen and I feel heard. Um, and because it's an opportunity to talk about things that I'm interested in, but also highlight disparities that are going on against people who look like me, right? Or right. So, and it's given me the opportunity to better express myself and go through professional development actively. So I appreciate the Black Doctoral Network for giving me this opportunity.
No, thank you. And we appreciate you for joining us this evening on this wonderful panel and providing your insight. So thank you very much. Ms. Ekbet.
Yeah, for me, I've just been thankful to be in a community of people that really truly appreciate your work to the academy. I've found so many mentors. I've found so many um, co-conspirators to do the good work that we are instituting at different levels. I've been able to find research partners where we share the same interests. I think ultimately what I found is extended family. And I think, especially because there are so few Black women in the academy, to be able to have a community that's uplifting, that you can rely on, that you can network with. Um, I, there's no greater feeling, right? And so I think this, I just thank the Black Doctoral Network not only for providing opportunity, but providing me with extended family outside of the one that I have.
Thank you, Ms. Ekbet. And we love to have you as part of this network. Dr. Shearer.
Yes, the Black Doctoral Network has really helped me personally and professionally. I attended the conference 3 years ago as a participant. I didn't know anyone there. I went on a whim and I met a network of great people. The body, everybody was warm, the faculty as well as the participants that were there. The second year, I submitted my abstract. I had just completed my dissertation and I had an opportunity to present the second year. And then the third year, I had an opportunity to present. And this to 2020, I presented with my colleagues that we graduated together, and we had an opportunity to present virtually, and for it to be the first virtual conference. I think everything went extremely well.
Thank you, Dr. Shearer, for all your contributions and within the field. So we appreciate you for being part of the BDN network. And
Thank
Dr. Ray.
For me, professionally, I've worked with other organizations and been kind of behind the scenes and doing things with conferences. With the Black Doctoral Network, it just felt like home. I've been participating as, like a conference attendee. I've been a student member. Then, after graduating and so forth, it was like, okay, now how do I contribute back to an organization that contributed to me while I was a student? So this year I had the wonderful experience of working the conference behind the scenes. And I got to work with Miss DeAndrea Taylor, affectionately known as D to me. So I got to work with her and really see all of that Black brilliance, and all of the submissions and the abstracts. It was just great to see what's out there. Personally, it's kept me humble. When we've met as committees, just listening to each other talk about what they were working on. Even had some doctoral students saying, I'm here. We were supposed to have a committee meeting, but we wound up, just giving them some few words of encouragement. You're there, you're almost home. And just, that extended family, just that level of support that you need at whatever level of your educational journey you're on, but just giving those words of encouragement to each other. I invite everyone that's listening to, if you are a member and want to work behind the scenes, it's another extended family, as already been said. So I feel like BDN is like an extended family, and I want to thank them for allowing me to use my gifts. You know, you use your gifts. When you're blessed, you bless somebody else. So if this is the blessing I'm to do, then I'm more than happy to work with BDN and help the organization continue to be a blessing to others.
Thank you, Dr. Ray, and your continued contribution. And we love you being part of the BDN network. But that concludes all the questions that I have for this episode. I want to say a huge and profound thank you to our wonderful expert scholars and panelists that joined us this evening. It's been a pleasure dialoguing and having this conversation about a very important topic that we all can directly identify with. So before we go, I want you all to have an opportunity to provide your contact information for some of our audience members that may want to have a further dialogue. So, Dr. Scherer, how can the panelists get in touch with you?
Yes, they can reach me on LinkedIn at LinkedIn /J Sherer, or I can be reached at my email, which is Sherer, SHERRER 50 at gmail.com.
Thank you. And Miss Ekpe.
Yes, I would love to connect anyone that is in the audience members or any of the panelists as well. You can contact me at my email, which is l.ekpe@tcu.edu. And on all social networks, it's my first name, last name, so LESLIE, and then EKPE. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And Miss Dangleben.
Yes, I just want to echo what Ms. Hector said. I'm definitely available to connect with anyone here on the panel and anyone here who has listened to what we had to say and is very moved by our remarks. And I can be reached at tdjangle@mcsd.edu.
Thank you. And Dr. Ray.
Yes, I can be reached by email at prayoflight68gmail.com or my website. And you see there, drprayoflight.com. One of the things I can help ladies connect with is putting together a success profile. So feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you again for joining me this evening on this wonderful Friday. And to our audience members, if you have enjoyed Conversation Starters and would like to keep up to date with the latest BDN developments, please be sure to check us out on blackphdnetwork.org and become a member, and or follow us on Facebook at Black Doctoral Network. Please be sure to share this live session with your friends, families, and colleagues and professional networks. Again, thank you, panelists. I'm your moderator, Fesse Longe, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a nice evening.